I am Shani Bannister, the graphic design intern with Cadron. I'm also supported by Kathleen Sikar, the Senior Officer for Community Engagement and Accountability in Trinidad, and Tiffany Richards, the Senior Communications Officer, also based in Trinidad. This will be the first of a series of 6 webinars that will teach you design, a little bit about communications, and how to use it in, while using the CA approach. Um, let's begin. So, just some basic ground rules. All questions are important and equal, so feel free to ask anything during, and we will respond to it after, as well as during the question segment. Um, Make sure you are muted at all times, just so we don't end up having any odd background audio. Additionally, additionally, um, feel free to send me your email addresses. When you do that, I will send over some resources that we will reference throughout this webinar. Let's get into it. So the schedule is as follows. Today is the introduction to design. The next webinar will be the elements of a good design. The webinar after that is the design essentials, which is a tutorial lesson, which we will be using the Canva platform. After that would be the communication strategies and design webinar. And then another tutorial session called applying your knowledge. And then after that, just basically how everything we have learned and putting it all together. During the course of this webinar, this webinar series, you may receive work that is to show some progression throughout this process so that we can see what you're learning and any areas that we can help. So the breakdown of today's session is the definition of design. Then we go into the origins, the importance of messaging in our design outputs, how we can use design to better engage with communities, and information as aid, which is a CA pillar, and also design as relief. So the definition of design. Um, Design basically speaks to the creation, the conceptual process, which would be where your ideas come from. Design is something that has a purpose and it is devised for a specific function or means to an end. It's not just about making things look good or aesthetically pleasing, but also that we're having an impact. And especially with the work that we do with IFRC, we have to make sure that our design work is impacting communities and it is actually helping and it is working towards a goal. Then we speak to the definition of graphic design. Now, graphic design is the process of visual communication through problem solving with typography, photography, and illustration. So that just speaks to the visuals, but the visuals also have a goal. Obviously, in your projects, your programs, anything that you're doing, there's end goals, whether it be behavior change, advertising visibility. So graphic design is used in that way to aid in better projecting things for the community's engagement. So the definition of design. I wanted to kind of make a pun, which isn't very funny, but I said focus on the eye, which plays on the eye, your eyes. But the important words are like aesthetic, how everything comes together, what makes it beautiful, the visual, then the communication aspect. What are you communicating? What are you trying to communicate? And is everything blending together to communicate that? Impact. We have to make sure that we're not just making things for making things sake, but there's an impact. The criteria. What's the criteria? Whether it be the dimensions of the board or just the communications criteria. your audience, which could also be called your community. You have to consider that whether it be culture, language, all of those things come together when you are making a design. Information, additionally, make sure that your information is accurate and that you have safeguarded your reputation, the reputation of the IFRC, whatever the case may be. You just have to be very sure that the information you put out is accurate and correct, grammatical mistakes, things like that. Let's see. So the origins. This is just to speak to where we would have seen design start. These things are still very prevalent in our lives now. But if you look at the caves, hieroglyphics, things like that, Mayan and Aztec art, I'm sure a few years ago we would have all thought the world was ending, because of the writings on rocks and things like that. All of those tie into visual communications and graphic design. African prints, tribal prints, these are all ways that people would have used, to communicate with each other, and it was just happened to also be visually stimulating. So now I hand over to Tiffany, the Senior Communications Officer, and she will speak to the importance of messaging.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Um, so my role in the webinar this afternoon is to talk about the importance of messaging. And I want to start with a quote because I am big on quotes. So this is a quote that says, words are, of course, the most powerful drug used by mankind. And it's a quote by Rudyard Kipling, who is, well, was considered a prolific English poet, short story writer, novelist, journalist. Um, he's now viewed as a little problematic, but I think that the quotes in itself still stands. And what he was saying, it's one of his most famous quotations, and it was made during a speech to the Royal College of Surgeons in London in 1923. He was referring to our ability to use our words to change the way another person feels, thinks, to influence that person to do or feel things. Similar, much in the way that mind-altering substances or drugs would. So I just wanted for us to keep that quote in mind because it will help us understand the importance of messaging. So let me start off with a disclaimer. This here is not critiquing any of the visual material, the flyers that you see here. I'm just using them to show the different messages. So when you are designing your graphics and you're thinking about your message, what you should be thinking about is what is the purpose of your message, because you could be asking of your audience different things. You can be simply informing them that something is taking place and this is where they need to be at this time, the location, those sorts of details. That's simple information. You could also be informing them how to protect yourself and your family from mosquito-borne diseases. What do you do? Sleep under bed nets, use insect repellent, cover water storage containers properly. You can also use or craft your messaging in such a way to persuade persons. You want to have them change their behavior, or you want to convince them of something. And you can also, it can also be, your messaging can also be a call to action. So you want them to do something. You want them to come along to the cleanup. You want them to be part of cleaning up their community. You want them to make a concerted effort to protect their families. There are different things that you can ask people to do via your messaging. So when you're thinking about it initially, you must think about what is the purpose of your message. So I know Shani said that she would give a little homework. I also want to do some, but it's nothing too strenuous. I just want you to look around you in your daily lives and look and see the types of messaging that you get from different graphics. So just now that you know about the different types and things that they want you to do, just take a look and see, and also see what appeals to you and what doesn't. So that will give you an idea of what will appeal to your audience and what won't. Okay, so we're still talking about messaging, but here I want to bring in key messages. So your messages will not, hopefully, be designed in or developed in a vacuum. They will be part of a campaign that you have ongoing, and in that campaign, you would have developed, or there would have been developed, key messages. And key messages are simply the core information about your product, your brand, your organization. It forms part of the story that you want being told about your product, brand, or organization. Whatever is out there in the media, in the atmosphere, what people are saying, those should be your key messages. And if you have good key messages and if they are repeated enough, that should form the narrative about your product. Key messages should be concise. Of course, if they're too lengthy, persons are not going to remember them. Some interesting research has shown that people nowadays have the attention span of a goldfish, which is less than 9 seconds. Now, I'm going to contradict myself here and say that upon further reading, I discovered that that may not necessarily be true, as goldfish are particularly smart animals, something I did not know. But the point of the matter is that you should be concise. Comprehension. Your audience should understand what you're trying to say. So I find that we in the IFRC, we tend to use language that we're accustomed using, and that tends to be a lot of jargon, the technical words in our fields, in our profession. Your key messages should avoid jargon as much as possible so that your audience can understand what you're saying. Break it down, make it simple. Connection. What is in it for your audience? You are asking them, there's a call to action in your message. You're asking them to come and do something. What is in it for them? If your message does not resonate with them, then they won't pay attention and then they won't heed your call to action. So your message has to connect with your audience after they understand it, of course. Credibility. Shani mentioned just now about grammar and mistakes. And those are some of the things that can impact your credibility. If there are mistakes, grammar mistakes, or any other sort of spelling mistakes in your message, it is going to cost you some credibility. People are going to say, well, if these people can't get these simple words right, then, I mean, what they're really trying to do, I don't think they can get that right either. Also, if you're going to be delivering a message about something specific, let's say cleaning up, I'm going to use the National Societies here as an example. If the National Society is having a cleanup exercise, the space that the National Society organizes should not be full of items that can breed vectors. So the National Society space should be clean if they want to have some credibility in telling people, clean up your neighborhoods and clean up your areas. And lastly, we see this a lot in our modern day society. Your message should be contagious. It should be something that if you had to go viral, that it would go viral. If you want more coverage of your message, it should be something that spreads. So I would suggest that you put some thought into it, you make it catchy, you put it into context. The more your message spreads, of course, is the more that it gets out there, the more that people hear about it, and the bigger of an impact that you can have. Balance. Oh, wait, before I go into balance, let me just go back to key messages there for a minute. Key messages also helps spokespersons when they're speaking to the media. So as long as you have your key messages developed, it'll be easy for whoever is talking to the media about your project, whoever is the spokesperson, to have that conversation, to disseminate information. They will sound knowledgeable, they will sound believable, because there's no hesitation, as opposed to when people they use verbal fillers, as I just did, or they search for their words. They don't come across as knowledgeable or believable. I'm going to give you all just a brief example. I don't know if anybody knows these two lawyers. I'll use lawyers. There are other things as well, but I'll use attorneys. Faris Al-Rawi, who is the Attorney General of Trinidad, and Stuart Young. They are politicians, but they're also attorneys, and they generally come across as knowledgeable because they stick to their message, and they sound always as though they know what they're talking about. So if you have time, you can just check them out, not for the politics, but just as an example of people who, when speaking to the media, they have their key messages, they repeat them, and they come across as very credible and knowledgeable. I gave the example earlier about flyers because those were most visual, but your message could come in anything. It could be in brochures, in pamphlets, in posters. Currently, I'm working on a video of the achievements in the Zika project, and my message in that video will focus on the objectives. Did we do what we set out to do in the beginning? Did we meet the objectives for risk communication, for vector control, for psychosocial support, for knowledge sharing and learning? The production of this video could be excellent, high-tech, but at the end of the day, my concern is, my focus is whether or not the message came across, whether I got out what I wanted to get out. And finally, on balance, it is not easy, but you have to try to strike a balance between your design and your messaging. Design is important because it attracts the eyes, it attracts the attention, it attracts people to your message. But the messaging is important as well. So you have to keep in mind what you want your audience to take away, what you want them to remember. So don't let your message get lost in the design. It is a fine tightrope that you have to walk. It's a delicate balance beam that you can't overbalance on either side. The design should not distract nor detract from the message. It's really important that you remember that and try to find that delicate balance, because really and truly, it is the messaging that will get the audience to do whatever it is you want them to do. So I will leave you with that, and Kathleen will take over.
Hi, Kathleen.
Hey,
Hi, Kathleen. Can you just start over? I'm not sure if we heard you.
Okay, good afternoon. Hi, okay, good afternoon, everyone. Please forgive my voice, it's a little cracked, and I'll try my best to get through this presentation without coughing. Okay, I have been asked to look at how design can be used to engage communities. And over the years, well, we'll start with something that Shani said when she spoke about the origins of design. And you would realize that a lot of where design started would have been with communities coming together to create buildings, coming together to create language, culture. So it would have originated out of community interaction and community focus. Over the years, we have got to the stage where it has become, design has taken on a role away from that thought and has become more of a function that helps to create buildings. And they say that you build a garment, you build based on your customers' needs. And as a result of which, you have had developed, or what has developed, or what has been developing, areas of buildings, not necessarily communities, but just areas of buildings. You have hundreds of houses in an area, and there are no places for anything other than houses. However, as we've progressed, we have started to look at things a little differently, and we've begun to realize that we have to include safe spaces, we have to include green spaces, we have to include places for hospitals, for churches, for schools, because so you see that there's a trend heading back in that direction, where community is now being seen as the center of all development. There's an architect by the name of Diabedo Francis Kele from Burkina Faso, and he is known for including community-oriented spaces into his designs. These invite people to sit and engage in conversation, and they provide a space to do what they like or to just be. He stresses on the use of color, material, and ensuring accessibility for all to empower people to make a space of their own. So his designs are quite colorful, they are large, they are spacious, and they try to create areas where people can relax, especially in the stressed world that we live in, where to get to work takes you a 2.5-hour commute, or back and forth, or your job is not necessarily what you want to do, where society, we have a lot of political discord, we have economic inequality, we have a lot of divisiveness, discrimination, unemployment, poverty, and the social services safety net isn't holding anything or anybody anymore. So we need, or what the thinking is that we need to have designs, or we need to include these communities or get community feedback in order to create areas excuse me, that try as best as they can to bring back a sense of normalcy and comfort in communities. So how can communities impact design? Over the past 10 to 15 years, and I can talk from Trinidad, for the case in Trinidad, there has been that movement towards including the communities in the design process, in the design elements of planning a development. And what they have found is that it is able to reduce that divisiveness by including the community in the decision-making process and bringing them together in an area that they would have not necessarily been included. It also gives, for want of a better two words, the powerful people, those that have the money and those that are spending it, the opportunity to understand where the communities or where people are coming from. For example, there was an incident a couple of years ago where a company decided to design a home area, And they sat in their offices and they put together all the wonderful designs and everything. And I had the opportunity to view these designs only to realize that they had not gone out into the community to see the topography of the community. And they had actually put a sewer treatment plant running uphill. So because they felt that they were powerful, that they had the money, that they did not have to go out and interact with the community to find out what the topography was like, what the challenges of these communities were. They felt that they didn't have to do that. So that one little thing that they didn't do cost them close to $3 million US to have to go and undo. So it is incentive for the persons, the powerful people, as I call them, to come outside and be aware of what's going on, listen to their communities, listen to the needs of the communities, so that they can build and create spaces that are more functional. It brings about in real life and in real terms and real time, what are the living experiences of these persons? What are they going through? What are their main challenges? Are the challenges those of transportation, health, education? It doesn't make sense building a complex, a huge sporting complex in an area that really needs schools or needs to have daycare centers. Why build a sporting complex? So it gives those that have the opportunity, the powerful people, as I call them, the opportunity to come out and see exactly what is happening. And it also bridges the gap between design and reality of that design. And continuing, it allows persons to be seen and to be heard. We have, unfortunately, over the years, not taken that into consideration, and we have decided that we're going to do work, and I'm not talking about the IFRC, I'm talking about the larger stakeholders that facilitate a lot of the development in these kind of countries. They have decided that they're going to do what they want to do, and they're not listening to anybody. But once you can involve communities in the impact on design, they can impact on design, because their voices are heard, they are seen. It supports what is now being called the social design, where they are actually, as I mentioned before, the part and parcel of the project design framework. It also provides buy-in and commitment through inclusion. Again, we go into communities and we try to create situations, we try to create communities, but we do not have the buy-in of the persons that are living there or happen to be in the area, and you end up with one. I remember one young lady telling me that she couldn't understand why the road was so big, that we were probably just looking to create an extra landing strip because it was near to a place of the airport. She didn't see the importance of it, and she felt that we were actually encroaching on lands that belonged to her. But communities can provide, if you get the communities involved, you can have greater trust, understanding, openness, and cohesion. And you also get that empathy among all stakeholders. So they begin to understand that it's not just about putting down structures, it's not about creating communities, it's about creating lifestyles. So how would design impact on the community? If the community feels that they are part of it, and that they are being heard and they're being listened to, and their thoughts and their contributions are being respected, you will develop that trust and confidence in the community. It will give them the opportunity to advocate for themselves and for the community. It gives them also that sense of being active participants in their own destiny. Quite often we just step back and say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and we do not take into consideration what the community really wants. And they will feel empowered, and they will feel appreciated, and they will feel connected to the development of any sort of project or program they're trying to introduce. And how do they feel? I can tell you how I felt when I visit in parts in Trinidad that I can drive through, and I can see categorically I built that house. And it gives me a sense of pride. And for me to be able to say that I have built that, I have helped a family, knowing that sort of pride in my work, and the pride in creating or contributing to a community is something that I can actually see and touch. So it creates a landmark for community pride, because once the community sees themselves in it, then they are more likely to take better care of it. It gives a place where everyone has a similar voice. There is no hierarchy. Where the people in power have supported or have listened to or have come together with the community, it shows that there is no hierarchy. There's no you're better than me or I'm better than you. It provides interaction, discovery, and exploration. It also gives a place to transfer knowledge, because quite often we ignore the cultural aspects of development in favor of what do you call tests and research can say that this particular thing does that, when in truth and in fact the answer may really lie within the community and within their cultural practices. So it gives people a chance to exchange information, to transfer knowledge, to share, to try and understand from a different perspective on either side what happens in a community. It's a place to bring people together, to socialize, and to be creative. If you design an environment that encourages people to come and sit and chat, you will have I would say 80% chance that you have a very calm community, or you have a community that will look after each other and that will not allow any divisive elements to come into it. I think I strongly believe that, and I get at this from my own experience, that not too far from where I live, we had a open space, and the corporation, the San Fernando Corporation, wanted to put a basketball court, and of course the community said no, they didn't want it, and the corporation asked us, well, why? Give us reasons why, and we told them, the age of the children in that area would not have they were very young. So to bring a basketball court in there, you might end up having nobody in it, or you might end up having the wrong people in it. So they listened to us, and instead they put down a play park, which is doing very well. At least they listened. So if I had to summarize why I think that design is important for community, it would be to say basically that it can bring people together that would not normally have had an opportunity to do so. It brings ideas together, and the outcome is normally something that is workable or positive for all involved. Thank you. Shani. Shani? Oh, sorry, I have to give her back. One moment. Oh, okay.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks to Tiffany and Kathleen for their contributions. So now I will begin to conclude. So I will be talking about information as aid and design as relief. Now, the reason I thought this was important was oftentimes we have the information and we don't disseminate it in a way that the necessary target audiences can benefit from these things. And that's very important in the work that we do as we engage with communities, different demographics, different age groups. So, for example, meteorological office may say that they're lower level troughs. A lot of us don't really know what that means, but with the right design, with the right communication practices, we can generate key messages that engage our audiences basically. Um, so I like to talk about impact a lot because I think that it's easy to have deliverables, it's easy to generate output, but are we having the impact that is essential um, in the line of work that we have? So, how is your design beneficial to the dissemination of the information you've received? So, a lot of that lies with communications. How are we generating our key messages based on our audiences? So, that includes the age, the gender, the language, the culture of the people that we are talking to. Certain colors mean certain things in different countries, political affiliation, things like that. Those are the things we have to consider within our designs. What are the project and program goals are very important. Um, we don't just put things out necessarily for visibility, but are they helping with behavior change? Are we making people stop and think? What are your designs doing? And we'll cover a lot of that throughout the next few weeks. We'll speak to communication and then also to communities so that we have a better understanding of the messaging process, but also the community process and that feedback process, because the feedback process is what's going to help strengthen the designs as we go forward. And we must ask ourselves, are we helping vulnerable groups? If I'm dealing with a situation where 20 people don't have a computer or access to internet, why are all of my outputs being put on social media? We have to think about the design of these things because, again, impact. So I think for today, we have touched all the necessary theoretical parts um, for this design webinar. Next week will also be theoretical, and then the one after that will be a tutorial session. Um, I really want to encourage everyone. These presentations will be uploaded. Feel free to review them because these things will come up and they will be important to consider when we get into the homework, which you will have some of. It'll be important for your design. It will generate that impact that I'm talking about. So now we will ask anyone if there are any questions. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Kathleen and Tiffany so much for their support. And feel free to ask questions directed at any of us. Thank you all. Thank you, Arlene, for the kind comment. Well, since I sense that everyone is rushing to ask questions, um, thank you so much, Diana. Um, we will be here again Monday at 2 o'clock for our next webinar. I want to thank everyone that supported. That includes the participants. Without you, this would not actually be possible. Feel free to add your emails to the chat so that I can send you some IFRC generated resources that we will reference throughout this webinar series. Thank you so much.